deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are an awakening center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, and I are pleased to present Constitutional Republic's Coinage Act of 1792. But before we begin, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Islam, everyone. Grand Sheik.
Islam.
You
Shalom.
kind of saw it on the screen before.
Taking notes.
All right.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Body makum. Going abort. We want to talk a little bit about the Coinage Act because people need to really have the fundamental civic knowledge of money, lawful money, at North America, which is based on the principles of gold and silver coins from Andalusia, which is later called Spain after the defeat of the Moors. And that is the standard of coinage for the United States. Now, we have to put things in perspective, and then I'll make a few other notes. The perspective, so take notes so that we can follow along. Also, so you can do a little cross-reference and back research so that our shortened conversation for these 2 hours makes sense to you. And it's very important because the people have been misguided into in relationship to what money is not, how debts are paid relative to discharge, set off, why these things exist today that did not exist under the law supreme of the land. And of course, you already know that the fiat system controlled by the Khazarians who took over the Republic at North America in order to institutionalize forced servitude. They made sure through the animal husbandry training instituted via the General Education Board by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, that the people, the general citizenry, and particularly the Aboriginal people of the land, i.e. the Americans, the true Americans, distinguished from U.S. citizens, you got to recognize and understand and be clear that these are two different classifications of what would refer to in citizenship classification. It's not generally taught, mainly because of the social politics at North America. But to have perspective correct, we got to remember that the Aboriginal people of the land, the Americans, who are the copper complexion people, they would come under national, and they would come under Indigenous and or Aboriginal. And relative to constitutional and treaty principle, they would not be subjected to, say, some of the legislation relative to U.S. citizens. And this is where you have Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution for the United States dealing with the issue of diversity under the consular venue. And we already know that in 54, Eisenhower administration suspending jurisdiction at Morocco, they suspended consular court. That's a subject matter in its own, and we went over that a few times, but we want to deal with the Coinage Act because the people need to know the rule of law relative to money, because very often, and it's coming up more commonly recently, as people have become more astute as to the fiat operations of the corrupted and overthrown U.S. The republic that was overthrown by the operatives of the U.S. democracy system. And as you all know, that many of the people, due to misinformation and not really being taught the truth about lawful money as per Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, they've been trained for so many generations into the fiat system of the those who overthrew the republic, that they have little to no knowledge of what money actually is. And by necessity, with the political operations that are taking place on the planet, with nation states doing what is now known as de-dollarization, they recognize that if they, and we're talking in general with the Asiatic nations and African nations, and particularly with much of the political operations that are taking place currently in West Asia, falsely represented as the Middle East, that's West Asia. A lot of these things are going on that's affecting everybody around the world. And because the people here, and particularly the Aboriginal people, have not been taught civics, we will be more injured than most other people. And while on the surface, many people may wonder why I chose to talk about the Coinage Act, because they don't have a mental relationship to it, therefore not really understanding what weaponization is relative to the monetary systems. Now, one of the things that we need to establish right now before we go any further is that all things presented under the United States corporation company operating de facto as, not being, but as government. It is de facto because it's not the legitimate government. And as you already know, that in general, the masses don't know that and have not been informed of that, although many of you who come on this channel and other channels are aware of that. But as it stands, the masses of the people are still ignorant to the reality of what money is, not knowing that they will be victimized for lack of knowledge. So let's talk about a few things. I want you to take notes so that you can do some cross-reference. Now, keep in mind, this is very important because you got to recognize timeline. All laws established at North America in relationship to the supreme law of the land after 1861, technically, and in generally, in fact, after 1861, are de facto, or what is known as negative law, which means it's not law. It is legislation under color created or imposed under treasonous authority, which would be called misprision of treason operations under de facto, or an artificial and imposed governing body that by unlawful means have presented themselves as constitutional government when in fact they are not. So you've got to keep in mind timeline relative to dates. So the Coinage Act, keep this in mind, 1792. And you will find when you do your research that they made some modifications thereafter. And anything that modifications that were made after 1861 are actually unlawful and part of the treasonous acts for weaponizing the monetary system for the benefit of the misprision operatives who still maintain power of seat within the structured United States, but in fact were actually operative traders. And most people don't know that, and therefore the concepts of legitimacy is corrupted in the minds of most. And logically, when you get into subject matter like this, people who really don't know history, law, or numismatics, because that's not taught to the people, can get twisted or misguided when these types of conversations come up. But again, I repeat, it is important because of what's happening right now around the world, and many people will still be deceived by people whose intention is to rob their estates and to injure them economically, and for them not knowing the obligations of government, they would be misguided by what is called the controlled narrative. So keep this in mind. All legislation or bills presented to become acts and law for operations on the land jurisdiction in all trade, in all contracts issued by any representative holding seats of trust in the United States Republic is valid only up until uh, 1861. Thereafter, and particularly after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, who was the last Republic's president. Keep this in mind because a lot of people don't know this too. So in order to look at history and the political operations at North America, it's important for you to know that the last lawful president operating within the Republic government legitimately was Abraham Lincoln. Thereafter, every president operating on the land, exercising any judicial powers whatsoever, in every branch of government, including all branches of the Congress, thereafter are acting in a state of misprision. This is why by law, around the world, they're known as de facto U.S. democracy. Keep that in mind. When you forget that, you lose track of what law is and what law is not relative to the obligations of government operating on the land or practicing judicial powers, civil powers on the land, and also those who may be operating in maritime contract law and imposing it on the land, which most of you are used to this day, not knowing the distinction. So it's very important, these points that I'm making to you. So write this down so that you can understand weights and measures. Now, many of you may recall, say decades ago, when they used to have little composition books for the children in schools, they would show you grams, weights, and measures on the back of the little composition books. That was decades ago. You don't see that now because they don't want the people to know weights and measures relative to lawful money, because they cannot, what you call, impose theft by inflation, deliberately imposed by the bookkeeping systems of the voucher systems of the Federal Reserve notes that are used commonly among the people, particularly since 1913. And most of you are already aware of the operations that took place on Jekyll Island. So what's happening on the planet is that the misrepresentations and the corruptions have become so pervasive within the structure of international trade that the nations of the earth are now forced to start de-dollarization in order to counter colonial operations that was generally considered to be limited upon the Moors of the Maghreb or the Western Hemisphere, with the reconstructed history and the reconstructed nomenclatures as the fiction of teaching the people that North America, Central America, South America, and the islands was India. And so they called us Indians of the West. And so most of the history that have been told to you about the so-called West Indies, the Indians of the West, is a total reconstructed fiction. Likewise, in order to maintain misrepresentation that the people would not have the economic power to liberate themselves in relationship to economic countermoves, etc., was one of the reasons why the Khazarian operatives of the misprision operations after the murder of Abraham Lincoln, it was necessary for them to alter or to modify the Coinage Act in order to continue the processes of stealing the gold and silver from the people without the people being aware that they were actually being robbed by people who they thought was their government. The fact of the matter is that they have succeeded in doing that because most of the people to this day are ignorant of what money is and what money is not. Now, keep this in mind for your notes so that you can do a little research for yourself. Pennyweight. Pennyweight is Pennyweight. Pennyweight. Now, pennyweight is a troy weight. And so the troy weight is equal to 24 grains or 1/20th part of an ounce. Keep that in mind. 1/20th part of an ounce, which is a troy weight, which is referred in general in coinage and in numismatic as a pennyweight. So you must recognize when you're dealing with money, lawful money, you're dealing with weights and measures. You're not dealing with paper. Are we clear? You're dealing with weights and measures of precious metals and with the conditions for the purpose of solidity and firmness, limited alloys, which would be limited by law for the purposes of durability and wearability. However, the grains and measures by grains, by troy ounce, and by pennyweight, which you look at that as relative, is by law comparatively with gold, silver, and copper being the major coinage alchemical metals used for lawful money. So you look at the culture of the coinage that has been used. Keep this in mind. These principles, other than this standard that was set in 1792, goes back over 6,000 years on the planet, coming from the ancient Moabites, Canaanites, etc. So the monetary system of gold as a standard is ancient. So don't let them fool you by the miseducation practices that they have imposed on the people through the John D. Rockefeller, Frederick T. Gates mind control operations since 1902. So keep that in mind. The troy weight is basically 12 ounces to the pound. Keep that in mind. 12 ounces to the pound. That's your troy weight. Now, your penny weight is equal to 24 grains, which is equal to 1/20th part of an ounce. So if you write that down, you'll know how to take care of your own business when you get into numismatics, because this is what the rest of the world is operating on, because it's just established knowledge. Keep that in mind. It's just not taught to the general public, and particularly not to people held under brands Negro, Black, Colored, Indian, Puerto Rican. That information is generally held back from them because we are basically the people who have been the target of hybrid European colonial unum sanctum operations. And so they blur that whole area so that by generation to generation, they could rob the Aboriginal people and look like they're just operating normal government. So this is, again, why it's important to understand de facto, de jure. So I just wanted to set that up. Now I'll give you a little bit of background about the Coinage Act so that you can do some research on your own. But keep in mind, this has so much to do with the or what you would call the geopolitics that's taking place on the planet today, and has to do a lot with political determinations that are made by the nations currently in international trade. Has much to do with what's going on with the malls closing, businesses going bankrupt, people's bank accounts being robbed by the banksters, that it may appear on the surface that it's related to something else. No, it's related to this. Keep that in mind. So let's talk a little bit and trust that this spurs your interest and conversation, but also that you do a little study so that you can protect your families and make your determinations relative to what you buy, what you don't buy, when you buy, why not to buy, what you invest in, what you don't invest in, and what you remove from the hands of others whenever possible. Understanding the fundamental rule: if it's not in your hand, you don't have it. If it's not physical by weights and measures, it's a fraud. And I'm saying that again because they're pushing the central bank digital currency now, because people are waking up and the nations are stopping or interrupting trade with the corruptors who have now corrupted the whole world. They have deceived the whole world to the point that if they don't start fixing this, the economies around the world will collapse now. And much of the wars have to do with that. So now we're going to go into the Coinage Act of 1792. This is also, keeping in mind, it's also referred to as the Mint Act. All right. So this was an act established roughly a few years, 4 or 5 years after the adoption of the Constitution for the United States from Muslim law, which Obama told you about when Obama went and he made the speech in Egypt, and he talked about the history, the true American history, and exposed to you the true American Al-Moroccan flag, which is the red flag with the 5-pointed green star. And then they cropped out on the other side the stars and stripes, which is really the flag of amity and commerce. It's really a trading banner. And as you all know, after they murdered Lincoln, they have been teaching the people through the school systems that the stars and stripes is the national flag of the land. It is not. It's the trading banner. Keep that in mind. The national flag, or the overthrown flag, you'll see it's also referred to as the Bunker Hill flag or the Continental flag. That would be the flag that looks a lot like the flag that you see in Lebanon today with the cedar tree, the red flag with the white canton and the cedar tree. And then you will see the Al-Moroccan flag, which is the red flag with the 5-pointed green star. And that's also nicknamed called the cherry tree that George Washington chopped down. And keep in mind, at the time of the Republic, George Washington was praetor in place to authorize or to verify by treaty law and by constitutional law the enactment of the Coinage Act. All right. So the Coinage Act of 1792 was also known as the Mint Act. Now, officially, this was an act establishing a mint and requiring or regulating the coins of the United States Republic, and passed by the United States Congress, legitimate Congress, on April the 2nd of 1792. Now, this created the United States dollar. Keep in mind, so when you understand and know what a dollar is, you're no longer fooled relative to numismatics. And I'm reminding you that the general masses are not taught numismatics, because we're dealing with numismatics now. All right? And so that established the United States dollar as the country's standard unit of money. And this established the United States Mint and was regulated the coinage of the United States. And so the Coinage Act established the silver dollar as the unit of money in the United States and declared it to be lawful tender. Keep this in mind, lawful tender. So don't confuse the legitimate law, this lawful tender, with which was later imposed upon the people, referred to as legal tender. They're two different things. The people have been groomed for generations under legal tender because in general, the people did not know that the governing body was de facto. So they had no background. This is another reason I'm sharing this with you, because we really have to clear up a lot of things and decisions that we have made that we need to correct, and also what that you might make in the future in arguing your right of estate. That's another subject matter, but I'm throwing this out there. Those who know or comprehend what I'm saying, take it as real. Now, so the Coinage Act established the silver dollar as the unit of money for the United States and declared it to be lawful tender and created a decimal. Keep that in mind, decimal system. So write that down, decimal system for all U.S. monetary currencies. Get the point? And so by the Coinage Act, the Mint, so you look at the Coinage Act and the Mint related as one, was to be situated at the seat of government. Write that down. Seat of government of the United States. And the 5 original officers for the United States Mint were a director, an assayer, that's ASSAYER, a chief coiner, an engraver, and a treasurer. Now, don't confuse the treasurer of the Mint as being the secretary of the treasury. They're two separate, that's two separate offices. They don't teach the people because they don't want you to have this information. So I'm reminding you so you don't mix the two. But remember, the masses are not taught civics. And so we're here at the House of Reawakening Minds trying to empower the people or give them information that will empower them so that they're not deceived on these continuous counter moves that are made by those controlling the political narrative as you see changes taking place on the planet. And so the Coinage Act thereby allowed one person who could perform the functions of chief coiner and engraver. So all of these officers were well grounded in the duties of every other officer, so that a situation of ignorance would never come into play relative to what you would call counterfeiting that was probable. So start looking up some of the history relative to the Coinage Act so that you can make yourself more erudite in these matters, because it's very important. Now, Dr. G, would you have anything to add to that principle?
No.
All right. So keep that in mind. So the Coinage Act of 1792, keep that in mind. Look at the politics that's taking place around the world today.
Oh, I do have one thing.
Good.
So the fact that it was to be situated at the seat of government, was the Philadelphia Mint the first?
Yes.
Mint. Okay, so that's where the seat of government was at that time, and I think lawfully still is. Right?
Yeah. Now this is again, and this is really interesting too, Dr. G, because most people don't know that the lawful republics, Capitolium is still Philadelphia.
Mhm.
But that goes on to show you the lack of civic knowledge.
Mhm.
Now, when they did the overthrow, they moved the operations of the power operations of the overthrown government to Washington D.C. to the Seven Hills of Rome,
Right.
and that then you get into history of Polk, and his donating that land for the Circle Church and Chancery and the members of the Jesuit order, of course, the popes of Rome, those who met at Jekyll Island, etc. And so that's why you will see that in front of Independence Hall, across the street from it, it will have a plaque in the ground that people walk on every day telling you the date that they moved the government. But the Republic's government is still Philadelphia. And this, again, has much to do why they still maintain the ritual of the mummers free at Philadelphia. And you'll see, for those of you, any of you who travel to the Shakamoxon territory, what is Philadelphia now, you'll see a bronze statue of George Washington in front of the Masonic Lodge across from City Hall, where they end the mummers free. If any of you ever took a trip to the Masonic Lodge, which was the last lodge that George Washington closed at Philadelphia, you'll see a lot of the history and a lot of the documentation within that museum.
Do we know why it was moved?
Why? What was me?
Government was moved to DC.
Oh, that was the overthrow.
So by whom?
Basically, what is known is loosely referred to as the Khazarian Mafia or Cabal. The common name that's given to the masses, you already know we can't get into that because you already know it starts getting strikes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's people who claim certain religions,
right,
and pretending to be somebody that they're not, i.e., the real indigenous people who also were not supposed to know that they're the real ones. And this has much to do with the political operations. And of course, as we talked about earlier, when we were deciding how we're going to present this conversation, we talked about being noted that certain things we would not say. But as people, if you do a little research on John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, and then you go into the Rothschilds, you'll find out who these people are. And they're commonly calling themselves something that they're really not. Relative John 8:44 in the Bible. Because you already know they twist it because they don't want the truth out. And of course, that is actually what's going on around the world now, where people, in order to save their economies, are trying to not allow, although to some degree they can't stop it, to happen to them what happened in Germany.
Happened in Germany. Relative
to Germany being raped economically,
mm-hmm.
and it caused the rise of certain persons that people are familiar with. That's also been misrepresented in history. The real reason why certain things took place and it has much to do with the Coinage Act.
Really?
Although that doesn't come into the conversation. And so once they took over the banking systems around the world, which they run to this day, every nation that accepted the fiat currency of the Khazarian Cabal have found themselves slowly being raped and economically subjugated, recognizing that the voucher system to the Sister QB trust system were actually weapons. What they thought was money
mm-hmm.
was and is a weapon. And the interesting thing is that people when they're thinking about weapons, they think, bombs, they think gunfire, bullets, stuff like that. They don't think biotechnology. Because you wouldn't equate in your mind that what you consider a fiat currency is actually a biotech weapon. Because bio represents, the physical being, and you wouldn't relate that to that. But it's actually used to genocide in a slow walk. But you wouldn't look at, but because you're not looking at that, they're controlling the foods, the medicine, the land, their people's capacity to make a living for their families.
Mm-hmm.
The fiat system injected in order to steal. Because keep in mind, you got to keep in mind troy weight, as we did earlier, right? And that is how you would measure the value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you pay attention to a common factor with the fiat system, you never have what is known as, quote unquote, true price discovery. And that doesn't dawn on people.
When you talk about true price discovery, are you talking about value versus cost?
Yes, that's part of it.
Okay.
Meaning that when you look at actual numbers, like say if you look at actual number or measurement, so you're dealing with weights and measures, right?
Mm-hmm.
They used to have you on your little school books that they don't have anymore. You know that is by weight. When you're looking at the numbers that represent that weight, and what they have done was separated the two, the actual weight from nominal weight. So write that down. So the fiat could be nominal, and therefore because it has no weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just has a representation of a number, right? So on the surface, people don't know that they're being robbed. This is why, as an example, you could buy, say as an example, 30 some odd years ago, right? When I was younger, I had a Chrysler Imperial, paid for, right? And that car was valued at something close to around 10,000, right? Right now, that same car would be about $112,000. Also had a Chrysler 300, right? And that car with a Hemi engine right now at auction would sell for about $150,000. At the time, the car was 5,000. Are we clear? That's called inflation. The same car could not afford to buy now, but nominally, in what you call number form, I move more what you call numerical fiat by far than I did then when I was 19. I was 19 and 20 at the time, 19, 20, 21. Now, those were top of the line cars.
So we talking
That Imperial,
50 years ago.
yeah, that's, yeah, but
years
I'm just saying, yeah, but yeah, you're right. But I'm just saying, yeah, that's true.
50 some years ago.
But still, even 30 some years ago, them cars were still in what you call reasonable price. I could still get the New Yorker, which I also had New Yorkers too. New Yorker for like 30,000. Not even 30, it was about 25,000. Right? Now, as an example, that Chrysler Imperial LeBaron cost more than the Cadillac. It was cost more than the Cadillac, built better than the Cadillac, rarer than the Cadillac. Right? Now, to put it in perspective, but yet I couldn't afford that car now. Nominally. See now, so when you call price discovery, the concept is that if in gold, that the value would have stayed the same. Are we clear? Because it's weights and measured by law, by coinage. That's how the value is protected. They took it out of the law and they took it out of lawful tender and put it in legal tender, knowing that the people are not taught jurisprudence, and they're not taught civics. They're not taught constitutional principle, and therefore they could be fooled. And by virtue of the people, the same way that the average person listening to the show, the average person, well, not necessarily that's listening to the show, because most of the people that come on the show have some level of scholarship. But the general populace don't relate to what we're discussing at all. Not because they don't want to know, because they're not familiar. However, they don't know the difference between lawful and legal. So you see the legal tender is not money, but yet if you bring the legal tender to 90% of the people in this discussion, their conversation would be money. That established fact is indicative of their designed mind control ignorance, not by their own fault, but from childhood on up. However, it's sort of like when things aren't clearly and absolutely destructive in the face of the people, they don't think that they're being attacked, if you get the point. That's why they call it silent weapons. No different than, as you said, Dr. G, in our other conversation, when we're talking about Executive Order 11490, the nature of that is also related to the Coinage Act, though the Coinage Act is not in conversation. Because they could do what? Like, what is the reality today? The Federal Reserve note, legal tender, and you all can do the calculation now, do the little research. Go do the research in numismatics and see the value of what is called the US dollar bill, not US dollar. See, the US dollar is money. US dollar bill is a debt note. This is why those who know that dollar bills are not oxymoron. Bill is a debt. Dollar is a gold coin or silver coin by troy weight. You see? And so the price discovery would be actual value. So what would occur if any of you did a real research calculation on a dollar bill, US dollar bill? Its actual value today is about 3 cents. That would make the distinction between us, buying a Chrysler Imperial today, which is not available today, versus, 50 years ago. You see? Mm-hmm. Now, so that's called price discovery. Now, one of the things that you see taking place today now, Dr. G, when you're dealing with people who deal with numismatics, like these coinage that you're dealing right now, mm-hmm. Those people who you would acquire these by, if you ask them about price discovery, they immediately know what you're talking about because that's what they're dealing with. But you notice that that's not in the general conversations with the public. But people who deal with this know price discovery is central to the issue of gold and silver bullion trade and gold and silver coinage.
Well, even when you're talking about, by weights and stuff, it's the interesting thing, I guess, even gold is, well, in this sense, I've got copper, gold, and silver in my hand.
Now, so with the Coinage Act, there has to be this. Now, I'm going to give you some examples, you all, so that hold them up, Dr. J, and talk to them for a minute, and I'll talk to you. If you're talking about, as an example, the authorization of the following coins currently, right? Say the United States Gold Eagle, right? Or we'll say a $10, right? It would require 247 4/8 grains or 16.0 grains of pure gold. You see?
Yes.
Now that's a dollar. You see?
That's gold.
Yeah, that would be a $10. You get the point?
Right.
Now now
that's the face value.
Now what would be exactly? So now you're talking the difference between actual and nominal.
Right, because this at the time when I acquired this, it was about 19.
So see how
19
you're saying about,
It was about 19.
see now you're talking the nominal?
It was close to two grand.
Yeah.
maybe.
So now we're talking, now keep in mind, in reality, the grams and measures, that means the value does not change.
Right.
That's why they call the gold and the silver or real money stable.
But when
Now-
you say it does not change,
When,
the spot prices fluctuate up and down. up and down.
even when they're talking spot, when they're talking spot,
Right.
or they'll say they'll be selling gold coins and silver coins, and they'll say such and such above spot,
Right.
that would be called price discovery.
Right. So that's their
That fluctuation.
So how is because I never knew how it was how who makes a determination that the spot should go here versus
Those
there?
who deal with
Because
numismatics,
because anything above spot, if I'm a coin dealer,
that would be profit.
that's profit.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, this is the deal. As you're going into the analysis of real trade that you're doing now,
Mhm.
that involves what is known as price discovery.
Okay.
Now, what has happened is you look at the stock market, right, today, it's happening. And for people who don't understand what's happening with stock market and with gold and silver and with international trade, is that the fiat fraud counterfeit that has been normalized in society has corrupted the system so badly that the only one that holds value or the power of the value are those who are printing it. And therefore, they've been able to slowly rob not only the indigenous people, which they've already done. This is the basis of the so-called poverty of targeted Asiatic communities in the Americas, or what they call the lower class. It was done by that. But people go out and work for it, and never dawns on them that it was a weapon. So they are able to steal the labor for a nominal value that has an actual number to which that value has no relationship. It can't be done with the weights and measures, you see?
Mhm.
It can only be done with fiat. That's the power of the weaponization of fiat, which is why we're having this conversation. And we're giving people some information so they can do research on their own, so they become more astute to start protecting themselves, because this is the subject matter that's going on around the world in international trade, but they're not having an honest conversation with the masses. Are we clear?
Right. I mean, we tried. You have, I can honestly say, since I have known you, have always, had a silver. You probably have one in your pocket,
Always.
a silver coin in your pocket, and you've shown us and said, "Look, you need to get
That's the money.
This is real money." And
No, I wouldn't say real money.
Well, this is money.
No, this, remember, and see, even that qualification, that's part of the mind control. We have to get into this, Dr. G, the concept, right? Into the real. No different if you're having a conversation with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, my daughter is almost pregnant. Does that statement make sense?
No.
Hmm?
No.
So real and fake, kind of, or when you're saying dollar bill,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. That's because they know that people can't read, right?
Okay.
So the dollar is the gold and silver coin by troy weight, right?
Right.
And by pennyweight, right?
Right.
A bill is a debt.
Right.
So you can't have this and owe. But if you have that Federal Reserve note, you owe, even though it's in your hand.
Right, because it was never given to us.
Because it's not what they represented.
It was never represented to us.
It's never what it's not.
I know it's never what it's not, but I'm saying when it comes to the training, because we've been educated.
Training is to think it's money.
Right. It has been to think it is money.
And it's not money, never was,
right.
Never will be.
Right. But it's
always presented as money.
What makes money money?
Here, you got it in your hand.
Yeah,
well,
I know.
This is the culture.
Well, here's why. Before you answer, I'm going to tell you why I'm going to say that. somewhere in my, vast collection of stuff, I have some rods, right?
Mhm.
And these rods are from the Kikuyu tribe of central Kenya, I believe. I've had these rods for 25 years, maybe. It was their money. It was their method of trade, of commerce.
Now, let's go. So you got to go to history, right? For over 7,000 years, the standard of money at Midgard around the world for trade, dealing with international and national trade, is gold, the alchemical metal of the sun in nature, silver, the alchemical metal of the moon in nature, and copper, the alchemical metal of Venus. Does not exclude other precious metals, but the monetary system is based on gold, silver, and copper around the planet. Are we clear? In conjunction with material barter trade. But the money, so we're not talking about tradable issues or things traded.
Okay.
That's called barter. Are we clear?
Okay.
Now, this is what must be understood, because they're not taught about money, they keep thinking that anything is traded is money. That's a training. That's not what it is. And so people been trained that other things are money. This is so that they could get off with the fiat.
I guess what I'm trying to say that, I'm going way, way, way back to come forward.
Yeah.
Way, way, way back. It wasn't a question of money. I don't believe it was a question of money in the sense. I mean, we know coins go back way there. There've always been some level of coins that got old ancient doubloons and this and that and pieces from this place and that. So yeah, we know that they decided that this was going to be the method of it. I can only call it exchange. All right, because
now we're talking about. See, this. Let's be clear what we're talking right now. There's no refute in what you're saying.
Okay.
What I'm trying to make clear of what's going on and the lack of clarity with people is that they don't know the distinction between money and barter.
Right, because you can use anything.
You know, when you're talking, correct, but we're talking barter instruments that are used in trade.
Right.
Distinguished from money. Doesn't make them invalid. But you must know the difference between bartering instruments, whether it's agriculture, whether it's this desk for your shoes, this for whatever, even this is still barter, can be used in barter.
Right.
But this is the money. And all the other things they've told you is not the money. That's the point. This is why they have blurred the argument with, see this? Hold on. Set lawful tender, distinguished from legal tender. Doesn't make legal tender barter instruments incorrect, but the legal tender is de facto in the principle of balanced weights and measures dealing with lawful money. That's why they don't teach lawful money, so they could muddy the water, that when people start talking about lawful money, they would start arguing barter instruments, which is not invalid, but that's not the subject. But that confusion was purposefully interjected, which is why people are confused with price discovery to this day, which is the mental state that has allowed them to rob the people, because the people don't know how to make the distinction. Why are we reading the Coinage Act? Because we know and we're well aware that most people lack the ability to make the distinction between money and fiat. So the argument that's going on, even if you start looking at what's going on in stock trade, right? And why a lot of people don't even understand stock trade, really. And why over and over again, people keep getting robbed investing in stock. Why? Because they're looking at digital numerical systems absent of price discovery, dealing with nominal trade value. It never dawns on them. So when you say, if you give somebody a Federal Reserve note, right, and say, oh, I'll give you $1 for this. Oh, right. And you trade that. Now I can take this and get almost 100 of them, knowing that that's legal tender, but this is lawful tender. What is in between? The scale, but it's not weight, is it? It's not weight, is it?
No.
It's actual knowledge of value, isn't it? That distance between the two is called price discovery. Now, so therefore, someone who has the mind of a child, you can go give them a Federal Reserve note for this and say, oh, give me that. I'll give you this. How much does this say? It says, let me see. Critical. What's the face value on this? Because now keep in mind, in numismatics, by law, on the rear, they're supposed to tell you the face value. That's what we printed on there. But I'm just letting you know that so that you'll know these things. Now, and so say if this would say say $10 or something like that, right? Right. But this is $50, right? Which it has right there, right?
Okay.
So $50, right? But if I pulled out a $50 bill fiat and gave it to you for this, and you gave me this, that would let me know you don't know what money is. Because you don't know price discovery. Someone who's ignorant of that gets robbed. This is what they have done to the people, and the people, having been trained in legal tender all their lives, don't know better. Now, because some people did know better, now keep this in mind, some people did know better up in, to the 20s, and didn't go for that, right? The de facto government unlawfully made a color of law statement that it was unlawful for people to possess it, and stole it from the people by force. And then, as soon as they got most of the gold from the people's hand, they jacked it up. And then they refunded the private United States corporation company that was going bankrupt, that the people, out of ignorance, thought was their government. And those operations have taken place and have been in place even to this day. That has much to do with the politics that are taking place with world governments now commanding price discovery in all trade, which is why they're not accepting the U.S. fiat dollar. And the other nations that concurrently, and particularly after World War II era, and after the era of Weimar Germany going broke with some people who claimed to be something was stealing from them, and caused a lot of the stuff that took place with the Second World War. And for those of you who know some of the history, I think it was in the 70s or something like that, Charles de Gaulle, who was the representative for France, they sent their representatives here to get their gold, and they would not accept U.S. dollar. I think they made a couple of movies called The Jackal or something like that.
Day of the Jackal.
Yeah, where the U.S. three-letter agencies set up assassination attempts against de Gaulle. Now, keep in mind, France is one of their allies. It is no different than when Germany, in and what 211 in that area sent their representatives for their goal, and all of a sudden these buildings went down in New York.
Yeah.
And that's
That
related
was
to
2001, wasn't it?
yes, related absolutely to this Coinage Act that we're telling right now, and guarantee you, none of the politicians brought this up while conversing the issues of them buildings coming down in New York and being lied to, saying that certain people of Iraq and others did that when it was actually an inside job of those who are maintaining legal tender, who really have been running the U.S. corporation government, particularly since 9/11. A lot of people don't know that the U.S. corporation government has been run by the Federal Reserve since 9/11. Back to the reality that people still don't understand color of government. And that every figurehead that they've had, knowingly that they have no authority, no power, and that they're just simply draining the resources of the people, holding offices that really don't count for the people. For all of them are trustees for the Federal Reserve. This is why you'll see. Let's look at this, Dr. J. Go right down. You don't see it as much in this area as you do in Philly. And in New York, if you go up on Kensington Avenue, right?
Yeah.
Certain areas here, it is not as bad here in this area.
Not what you want.
Horrible in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Horrible. But yet they the corporate representatives of the Circle Church and Chancery, led by a certain trader who domiciles in this area, sent over there over 130 billion that they admit to Ukraine, and more than that to another place that's in turmoil right now. And look what's going on down here, including the infrastructure. But they were so-called, of course, you know that's not what it is, voted into office to serve the people here, and have been taxing the people here and taking their finance and sending it elsewhere. Look, I'm gonna show you something else. The average so-called Social Security set up by Delano Roosevelt when they started back in their corporation with the birth certificates in 1933 era, right? They had for the people that have been working most of their lives, they get the average is say 1,400 with Social Security check for certain people who retired and stuff, right? Yet all of the people from all over the world, and I'm not criticizing it, I'm just telling you the facts, that walk across the borders, that count in the area over probably that they admit to over 10 million in the last few years, since the person who's the trader for the corporation who domiciles in this area, who acts as trader for their corporation, has been in office. They give them 2,400 notes, transportation to wherever they want to go, medical care, and housing every month. And that 24 is about $1,000 more than the average person, so-called U.S. citizen, whose taxes they've taken. Now, I'm not knocking it. I'm just telling you how the masses don't even understand what de facto government is doing to them. Look at the price discovery in that. Do you not recognize that these people who you're calling government are waging war against the people of the land? But we're talking legal tender versus lawful tender versus fiat voucher operations and what you would call the inflation system of robbing the people right in their face silently, and the people don't even know why they're poorer. No different than one thing that we always discuss when we're traveling, Dr. G, right? You say, let me go down here and get some gas while I'm out. Because I don't let my tank get empty. And one of the things, constant conversation, how we go from block to block and the fluctuation.
Yeah.
That fluctuation on that surface is nominal, distinguished from actual. But we don't look at it that way because remember, we're not trained in numismatics.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that actually deal with international trade are always dealing with price discovery. The people who move these instruments always deal with price discovery. Why? They're always aware of lawful versus legal. The average person, it never even crosses their mind. And thus, they have been, are, and will be constantly robbed by people that they thought incorrectly is quote unquote their government, who is really their enemy. The Coinage Act exposes a lot of this when you start analyzing what's been going on relative to your bank accounts, your saving accounts, what credit is not, how they're attacking you right now with squeezing credit because they already know that the people are trained
Interest rates are out.
into what? Not knowing price discovery that takes place in every transaction.
But you know what? If I believe if we were to collectively decide, we're not going to purchase XYZ things. I don't think one thing can do it, but things that put the screws to them,
And
tighten the screws, they would change it because they've done this because they can.
they do it because the people are ignorant because
right.
they've controlled the people's what? Education.
Right. And so there's nothing that has changed really. Nothing that has really changed that would cause interest rates to skyrocket for all of the price. Okay, so went to get gas today,
mm-hmm.
and so right now BJ's, because I go to BJ's is about the cheapest place that I've seen around. So BJ's was about $2.80 something because I get 10 cents off because of the car. So rode like maybe an eighth of a mile, where they put that new dash in right when you come out.
Oh yeah.
The new dash in is I thought this is an error. The regular gas is $4.70 some cents, and diesel is $7.99. And I'm thinking nobody in their right mind would, because right after that the gas is I think it was like $3.09.
Yes. Right
next to who's gonna pay? But there was a car there at the gas pump.
Yes. Now,
and I'm thinking gas is like $2 something to $3.09 in this area.
That's it. Now as an example, Dr. G, that is as close that the average people consciously deal with price discovery. Close in general. No different than, when they go grocery shopping, right? And they get a loaf of bread as an example. That used to be 98 cents. Now it's 3 something and 4 something. And knowing that the people
$6.99.
Yeah, and knowing that the people don't understand grams, weights, and measures, nominal distinguished from actual, they can literally tell the people to their faces that the inflation is 7%, 5 or 3, 4%, and it's actually over 300%.
Right.
Because they can't even count, though the numbers are there, because they don't understand price discovery because they're not taught it. It's not that the people, see, this is what I'm saying, Dr. J. It's not that the people can't or lack the intelligence.
Mhm.
They've been lied to and don't know they're lied to. And so their point of reference is incorrect. Therefore, that's how they can give you numbers that don't match reality right in your face.
Because at the same time, like you said, we're peeling, I mean, like in the millions going to this aid to foreign nations, but you got, like you
which
said,
is not only not constitutionally in their authority, which is the absolute immediate proof that they are operating treasonously in offices that do not authorize that whatsoever. They're actually doing criminal robbery of the treasuries of the people in their faces, and the people don't even question it. They're never thinking the distinction of legal and lawful. It only gets to sort of like, because some people have brought it up in recent years, right? They'll start talking about UCC codes and private and public and accepted trade, and they're really diverted. It's not that those things aren't, the people aren't measures. Troy ounce is a gold or silver coin. Remember when we talked last week, Dr. J, week before and last week, when and every once in a while when people are talking to us, and I will direct the people to read Article 1, Section 10, to put their, and the people say, well, that's the law of the land. And you can see the people, even after reading it, they're not even connected to it, as if it's alien. That's the law. Supreme. That's not just law. That's the supreme law. And the people will allow the members of the Circle of Church and Chancery, which is the Bar Association, British Accredited Registry, right? That all the congressmen and senators and women are, that by law are not to hold them offices, which shows you their criminality. And they don't even know that 1861 on out is color, or what is known as negative law, because they're not taught civics. They don't know weights and measures because they're not taught what a dollar is. And you ask them what a dollar is, and they'll argue with you day and night a Federal Reserve note while saying it's fiat, which means counterfeit. I mean, it's interesting. And I'm not knocking it, but I'm presenting, Dr. G, the trouble that the masses are in and don't know they're in. And even when you see the same Frederick T. Gates family, had all these generations, that same family has the patents on the mind control and the biological patented weapons that are injected in people's arms this very day, and they still don't make the relationship to the animal husbandry training operations of that Gates family. Yeah. With the General Education Board, 1902, after they murdered Winona, whose statue they have right there in Philadelphia, and they have Rocky running up the steps, running past that statue with the assassination of Winona, 1902. It's really interesting. And what I'm saying to you, Dr. G, no different than we're going through the Coinage Act. The information's available. The people don't relate because they've been disconnected from reality. The reality is available. But it establishes the reality of the fact of the silent weapons for quiet wars. And that's part of it. The subversion of the Coinage Act. And I want you to take note too, you all. They have subsequent modifications of the Coinage Act.
Yeah.
Thereafter, let me see.
1860.
94, 95, 96, 1796 to 1805, edited 1800, 1805, 1837, 1873, 1870 with the half dime. No different than the dime used to be spelt with a G in it, even, stuff like that. Now, but the point that I'm making, those who know law, that after 1861, everything after that is meaning, if you pay attention, they slow walk the people little by little, encroaching. Just like when you look in the military operations, what do they say? Encroaching. Little by little, they steal the rights of the people, impinge on their rights, and the people would adjust rather than enforce the law. They would adjust. And then they could give them color of law and govern them with it. And the people wouldn't even recognize that they're warring on the people. And then they put, look what the Russians are doing. Look over there. Happy the Clown took your sandwiches. And the people will start funding so-called temporary taxation to run the wars that never temporary, right? And the ones that are doing it to you are people who have been pretending to be your government legally, but not lawfully. And how many people would even tie it to the Coinage Act? Economic warfare, but it's not talked about. Why? Because most of the politicians are guilty of it and are participating in it, even when they pretend that they're working on behalf of the people. And now the point, or the other point that I'm making, Dr. J, so that people have a better comprehension of what's going on in the world. The nations of the world, knowing that this is one of the major keys to the root of the economic problems of the world, are enforcing, and this is where a lot of people don't get it. Why would Russia, China, and other nations be buying up all this gold and dumping the U.S. bonds? Look at the Coinage Act. They're enforcing the law of the land that we haven't been enforcing. And we're slow to understand the politics because we be thinking it's something else of what they tell you in the mainstream news. So what is happening? The very constitutional principles that our people think that are just situated here are principled. They're principled and are being what? Enforced around the world. And if you know that, because it is what's happening, you're better able to analyze the geopolitics. It's not the only subject matter, but it's foundational at the root of the entire world's economic trade wars. Now, logically, because we're talking about here at the House of Reawakening Mind, most people would just look at it as something interesting that we happen to be discussing. What we're discussing right now is being discussed with all governments around the planet, and is at the root of what you see taking place in the privy councils of BRICS operations, and taking place now in Nigeria. That's kind of on the things like this, with them running France out of Africa, and France threatening to go in there militarily to take control of the cobalt and other stuff. At the foundation of it is the principles of weights and measures of actual value distinguished from nominal that have been imposed upon the whole world. This is why they won't accept the U.S. and they won't accept the euro.
Is France operating under the doctrine of discovery also, or just their own thing?
All of them are. See, that's why they in other words, instead of saying it like that, they'll say West versus East. See, on the surface, if you don't know what they're saying, you're thinking geographical direction, or geographically, aren't you? Mm-hmm. You're not looking at that's connotatively in what you call unum sanctum alliance. So they won't say unum sanctum alliance. They'll say the West. They'll say Western nations, even though geographically they will not all be located geographically in the West. But people who understand the reality of the politics and the issues of the subversion of the republic order here that would bind them to the treaty, and that the Constitution for the United States is actually an international document. That's why they won't honor it. Yet they use it to claim authority, don't they? Because without it, they have no authority to hold them cease, do they? But all their actions are contrary, aren't they?
Yeah.
You notice that everything concerning people to preserve their rights, etc., and liberties have to do with constitutional issues. And who's the main ones they have to argue for doing things contrary? The people who they keep thinking is their government, who have to take the oath to that. But yet that's allowed to pass, isn't it? Because the people keep thinking, well, it's party opinion, which means they don't understand civics, do they?
Here's a question here.
But
It's asking, should we start using the dollarium amongst ourselves for goods and services we control?
see, in principle, we have that right. It is actually more valid than the Federal Reserve System. But what do they do, and what would they do? They do just what they do. Because they're de facto, they would physically and covertly, which they have been doing, subvert. That's what's going on around the world. That's why France was thrown out of Africa. And what we're saying, and what I'm also presenting to you, is that trend is and will be increasing. And so we have to start really doubling down, teaching civics and the consular principle. And you notice how the consular principle, which is the law of the land, has been treated as if it's incorrect, has been treated with disdain and disrespect, even with them kidnapping Lamont. The same way they were doing committing coups in Africa when they started doing what? Commanding price discovery on their cobalt and other rare metals. And if you pay attention to the geopolitics, China just banned the export of their rare metals and rare earth. What is that dealing with? Weights and measures. It's not abstract, is it? It ain't digital, is it? It's weights and measures, isn't it? So our people in general, the issue of weights and measures is totally out of their minds. You give them a piece of paper and put 100 on it, and they swear they got it going on. And that 100 is worth 30 cents. So for every 100 Federal Reserve notes, the actual trade value in price discovery is 30 cents.
That's $3.
30 cents. It's no words.
$3
Three.
for a dollar.
Apologize. 3 cents to the dollar.
So $30.
That'd be $30.
It's $30. Oh no, is it $30?
No, that would be.
Let me get it right.
Yeah.
So $1 is $3, $10 is 30 cents.
Yeah.
So 100 would
Mhm.
be $3.
Yeah. Now that's the reality. And so now when they're looking at like say when corporate heads are dealing with, as an example, the actual cost of cars, right, to manufacture a car, as an example. This is why, contrary to what people think they understand about the trade, and they would wonder why corporations will take their major manufacturing and move it to another country. Not unlike, as you see recently, where BMW and Volkswagen Group moved a lot of their main operations from Germany to China.
Mm-hmm.
Price discovery. Now the public be saying, "Oh, we're losing jobs." That's their concept. Not that they're not. But they're dealing with price discovery. It's not the discussion with the people, is it? Is it?
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to do it, aren't they? Because if they don't, they'll go broke, won't they? So what they see happening to the average person who doesn't understand the Coinage Act, they operate on it in every day as a business. This is why they're paying them or compensating them as an example, look at this, like the UAW, right? Went on strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the average one of them, making 60 to 100 grand overtime for a year, right? Right? The CEOs average 26 to 36 million a year. The CEOs of them corporations, Stellantis, Ford, General Motors, as an example, averaging 27 to 36 million a year. What man or woman in nominal, in actual value, needs that kind of finance for yearly?
Nobody.
And in half the time they can go play golf.
Right.
And now, why is that regulated? Because they give much of it to the politicians who are in partnership with them, knowing that the corporate heads are actually partners. The masses don't know that they're all part of the same U.S. corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how, like, when Trump said he doesn't pay taxes, and the people got mad at him, but he was really schooling the people, and they thought he was actually insulting them, and he was trying to school the people. He's talking about the Coinage Act. That's your rule. That's how you start. Anybody that doesn't that any investment whatsoever or trying to protect their estate on long term should study the Coinage Act so they could keep their head clear, even related to how nation states interact. They're not thinking nominally. Just like, all right, like I do construction too, right, Dr. J?
Yes, you do.
When you're buying lumber, plywood, and stuff like that today, not unlike years ago. Like years ago, they would have what you call kiln dried lumber, Dr. G,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be actual measurement. Now you have nominal lumber. Nominal is estimated, and it's always lower or smaller than it is. So like if you buy 1/2-inch plywood, as an example,
Mm-hmm.
it's more like just a little bit above 3/8. You now understand you're getting less, paying more.
And that's what's happening with everything. The bread that costs more is a smaller loaf. Smaller loaf or less volume in the
poorer or ingredients.
Yeah, everything you have to flip it over and go, oh, bioengineered.
A lot
so
more.
It's not even real.
A lot more stem in it with the grain, where they would do pure grain.
Now I've seen you go and we're getting wood,
yes.
and you have to go like spend a half hour looking at the quality to get one that's not wavy and while everything is just
because
like,
I know
trash.
It's nominal. I know it's nominal.
Right.
Why? Because I'm a contractor. I deal with their actual math. So I'm thinking when I look at the material, even like a lot of times when we're buying material, right, Dr. J?
It said, I like this. We put that up there. It said, they call it shrinkflation.
Yeah. Yes.
You're right.
Even in those terms, they're valid. They're valid, right?
Yes.
Now, what we want to do with our conversation is to get the people more scientific to the law of what it actually is. See, so now that's general and it's true, right? But if you're dealing with actual material trade, you must deal with actual weight and measures and nominal. And real distinguished from nominal. So the note is not the value. This is why, like for instance, like the people can generate more numerical volume of fiat than they did when they were, say, younger, right? And yet they can't afford the same things. But they don't know, but the numbers are the same. And they think they're making more and they're actually going backwards. Are we clear?
Mm-hmm.
The difference between nominal and real, but it's in your face, isn't it? This is again why they don't teach civics, and again why we chose, the Coinage Act, to give them actual measurement, not opinion. So what you can do is take the actual value, or what you call true price discovery, and in international trade, relative to international trade to lawful instruments, i.e., right, de jure, distinguished from unlawful, counterfeit, de facto, in both trade and in government. Keep yourself abreast of reality, because the masses live their lives in what? A false matrix. Mm-hmm. And even though these words are thrown around and people analyze them, whether they're dealing with the movies, comparing them to their lives, that's a reality. But what you recognize is that they really don't take it seriously enough, which is why they're counting on, like what you read, Dr. G, when you went into Executive Order 11490.
Oh,
they're saying they will encroach on the people's rights, and when the people get to a point of frustration and capitulate, they will devour them. Yeah. What are they dealing with? They know that the people are living a fraud and are willing participants based on their education, not on their actual intelligence, right, on their reference points. So the subject of the Coinage Act I'm presenting to you has an extension farther than what most people think. It's another reason I brought it up, to change the thought processes. Because this is the other deal, Dr. G. Even with a lot of things that we share with people over the years, if their reference points are corrupted, they won't agree on reality and therefore come to what you call a realistic and lasting mental and political or social unity foundation to move forward, because they will have what is by design scattered thoughts in legal processes, and only a handful will be operating lawfully. Therefore, they will do what? Go into chaos, which is part of the design, which you always see, which they talk about one of the reasons why when people organize in their little groups and have meetings, they're so-called fix their social and economic problems, it usually falls apart. Why? Because most of them are operating off of reference points that they think is real, even though basically they're intelligent people. This is why, like when we were talking before, that when setting up the meeting, I said one of the things that really serious people do whenever they have their meetings, they go through those pages which I showed you in the King Alfred to keep their head straight. Because if they're dealing with anything in governing body, dealing with sociology, people coming together trying to solve social problems, if they don't know what they've been raised under, they'll get a lot of people together. They'll come together emotionally, talk about what their feelings are and what they feel about things, and know not what they're talking about,
and not come to any conclusions.
Exactly, because they will be scattered, even though on the surface, the statements that they're making, their desires are intelligent, but their outcomes will be unintelligible. Why? Because they're basing them on trained reference points that the masses have accepted as real, and we have been running our lives in. No different than we remind people to go to House Congressional the session 192, mm-hmm. in which they say what? Credit is not money. Federal Reserve notes are not money. Currency is not money. And you get these people together and they start talking about, we need to raise some money so that we can get some things done. And soon as they do, and it's everybody, even people are conscious, they're undermined by the governing body de facto in everything they do, including all the regulations that they put on you, that you got to get permits, and you got to get a license to do this and a license to do that and a permit to do that. You can't even change. They ain't got to that yet, but you won't even be able to, if it was up to them, you wouldn't be able to change the tire on your car without paying a fee. You can't move a chair in your house near the door without having them inspected. And people still don't understand all of that's color. They don't know the difference between legal and lawful. So even back to the issue of delirium, right?
Right.
That's lawful with us. What would happen, and what does happen? They would interfere and call our truth a valid trade and barter. They would call it counterfeit, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And yet they've been governing us by force of arms with known counterfeit.
I'm going back to some questions that I started, comments. And this one here, I want clarification, because this one says, well, the Pope donated. Did you say the Pope, or did you say Pope, the president, or the Pope?
Pope of Rome.
Okay, so I want to make sure.
Oh, when we talking about the
donation of the
Pope,
that's
when
why
I talk about the 7 Hills.
That's
P-O-L-K.
James
Yes.
Pope. Yeah, that's why I wanted to correct
now,
that.
when they
it was not the Pope. It was James Pope, the president.
Now,
or the praetor, as you call it.
Yes. Now, when you get in, so keep in mind, this is important.
That's why I wanted to clarify. I didn't want to
and
get
all
that
of this,
by,
and it goes to show you, Dr. J,
mm-hmm.
How when you really get into actual law and civics, it has so many pieces to it that become a subject matter in their own. Mm-hmm. That's why we tell people to take notes, because because it's part of the equation. Mm-hmm. But again, the reason they don't teach real civics, because it would show that almost everything that we've been dealing with is a fraud. Mm-hmm. Our lives have been a fraud, not by our own making. Are we clear?
Right.
And our people being raised in deception, no different than as you made the actual numerical equation, right, to what they admit to. And it took place before that, when Rothschilds and them talked about it in 54 with their computer system. Mm-hmm. They initiated the Third World War. And what do you see going on right now?
They trying to tell us that the Third World War is imminent.
Threatening to come.
Yeah, imminent.
Now, the same thing that we discussed at last session is the same reality that we're talking about in the Coinage Act. We're talking about the disconnect and the realization. So you're talking about the realization of history and timeline, right? Mm-hmm. And we're talking about the realization of price discovery of what? Lawful money distinguished from legal tender that the people been trained in all their lives. Mm-hmm. And so our conversation is really to get the people to think. Not to agree, to think, but we're giving them reference points so they can recognize that it's weights and measures. It's measurable. We don't need to discuss what our feelings are or what our opinions are. We need to understand the criminality of persons claiming to be your government. It's also distinguishing the clarity between de jure and de facto operations. Because even when you're having these conversations, even with people who are intelligent, you still have to do what? Keep cleaning up, because our language even supports de facto.
Someone had posted that Bayer now has a bioengineered seeded watermelon, and then they further put here, to be exact, they introduced the Warrior and Embassy seed varieties. I would say to that, even though we're not talking about,
it's still related,
but it's just some of the stuff they're doing.
Because I would say this bio warfare.
If you already have legitimate seeded watermelons, save the seeds, because you will be able to plant them and harvest them over and over again, knowing that you don't have some of this, unless you go someplace where, like, Seeds Now or something where you can get heirlooms and then from there stock up. But I wouldn't, I would not trust anything. I mean, like, I already, they have to put that on, they have to put it on packaging when things are bioengineered, but you're not going to see a bioengineered thing on a piece of fruit. I don't think.
Look at what you're saying, right? And look, and this is what's important. How many people are looking at the organic distinguished from the GMO and not recognize that those who have been governing are using the exact same principle of the overthrow of the Republic, the Coinage Act, and the genocide operations, all of them dealing with the ultimate outcome of biological damage, which is why they call it silent.
Yeah. Because
you don't connect them. And so I say again, Dr. G, when you all, go over the Coinage Act, keep in mind weights and measures. If you keep forgetting weights and measures, keep in mind that you're forgetting money.
Yeah.
If you keep forgetting lawful, tender, overthrown, legal tender, introduced, go to your King Alfred documents, military operations of 11490, and it's right there in your face. But they never mention the Coinage Act. But if you understand, understand the mathematical equations of nominal versus real, de facto versus de jure, weights and measures versus digital, you'll comprehend that the foundation engineering principle application as a weaponization instrument are all based on the same principle. That's, again, what I'm trying to point out to you. So therefore, those of you who are astute enough to deal with these types of subject matters or to come on a channel like this, recognize that what we're saying, we're telling you more than what we're saying. But we're counting on you using your intelligence and do what you'll call deeper analysis and sharing it with people around you, because even people who are conscious keep forgetting these rules. This is why when we have our meetings, you start bringing a bunch of people together, passionately come together to fix stuff. And if they don't understand what's in operation actually, they keep missing it. And this is one of the reasons why our continued failure. And remember that they've studied this and measure it. And they tell you that this is what their discussion, their Privy Council discussions with administrative legal process of administrative law always involves the Coinage Act to keep their concepts correct. And we're just reminding you to do the same thing. Failure to do so, you're weakening your issue, meaning that because we all keep having meetings and bringing people together and trying to get them to do things positive. It's dangerous to have people within the body politics who don't understand these things, because they will be a dead weight even though they don't mean to.
Here's a question, Joe. What is the counter move to BRICS? Commerce is very important. What's the counter move to BRICS? Commerce is very important.
What, the counter move on their part?
They're asking what is there a counter move on, I guess I'm assuming, our part to what's happening with BRICS.
We're not going to attack BRICS. BRICS is working in our interest. This is another reason why we're having this conversation, because people keep thinking, and that's by design, we don't recognize friend and enemy.
Yeah, and then we have to also separate ourselves
their counter,
from the U.S.
That's why I keep saying it ain't we. Why do you think they've been so successful? We've been operating against our own interests because we don't know the rules. Another reason I'm bringing up the Coinage Act. So what is happening? The people in ignorance are what? Keep propping up the fraudulent counterfeit government against their own interests, which is why the miseducation is in place and institutionalized, so that the people will guard themselves away from their own liberties. No different than the people keep rationalize that people of color means some metaphysical, melanin oriented people. That's some divine metaphysical name of Asiatic African people in their divine mind, people of color, and say it proudly and deeply with passion. And it means artificial person, distinguished from that which is real. And you get a bunch of people together, dedicated as people of color, trying to fix colored people's problems. And it never works. They have a couple good fired up meetings, drink some Kool-Aid, and the next month, 90% of the people no longer coming to the meetings. And they're mad at each other based on opinion. So my issue with the Coinage Act actually expands into other areas. And that's what I want to bring to your attention. Because it's not really just about the coins, although the subject matter is the coins. It is to clarify and bring to your consciousness the weaponization of those instruments. These are not the weapons. These are the real. The Federal Reserve notes are the weapons, and they are nominal. They are not actual. And while that is known, the masses don't know that they're weapons.
And they are volatile in their value.
That's why there's no price discovery.
Yeah.
And price discovery is not allowed. Why? Because price discovery will not allow them to rob you. And we're just setting, some examples so that the people can look at things a little differently, a little more realistically, put it that way.
Yeah.
And because what's taking place today around the world, it is absolutely on the table of interest for everybody. So I'm bringing up the Coinage Act because I already know that the politicians won't. While in private, they're discussing this every day. And governments in their international connections, all of them are going over the Coinage Act to keep each other conceptually clear. Because remember, all of us have been trained, and therefore all of us speak within the lie, even when we're conscious. We keep saying money. Yeah, but you know what I mean? No, it's not money. And even people keep saying fiat. Well, we know it's fiat, and it ain't no real money. No, it's not money. My sister's almost pregnant, half pregnant. Someone who understands language knows that person doesn't understand speech pathology. Though speech pathology is a social tool under connotative linguistics. It's an actual tool. And we're not absent of it, all been trained in it. I'm just reminding ourselves so that we can do what? By the day, continue to baptize ourselves, because failure to do so, you're back in the mud. Because the society is constructed in fiat.
Yeah.
It's not just the instrumentality. This is what people, all of us, keep forgetting. Our lives are groomed in fiat. It is not just that these instruments that they've been giving us is not money. This is the money. This is not the real money. This is the money. This is the money. This is the money. This is the money. Everything else they've been telling you is not the money. when they come together in Privy Council in all levels of government, they come with the knowledge of price discovery at all times, and they talk monetary. When they talk weapon, they talk fiat. They just don't do it with you, with us. Failure for us to remember that and to keep that in mind when we have our meetings make us what you call consenting victims. That's why after they do this shit to us, they keep saying we keep consenting to the fraud. Why? Because the information is available. But because they're not giving it to you, we said, well, I didn't learn that in school. What do you expect them to tell you the truth that they're a fraud? Like someone passing counterfeit going to say, well, this is counterfeit, but give me true value for it. And because they've been doing that.
Of course.
Now, let me see if there's any other points of interest that I might point out to you all. Now, keep in mind for those of you who know that both Canada, political jurisdiction operating to the north of us at America, and the United States Corporation Company having or operating civil judicial powers on the land at Morocco here, etc. So Canada also once used silver coins. Got to remember, because this is all over. 5-cent denomination. They were colloquially referred to as fish scales. So those of you in Canaan land, you want to do a little bit of research in the numismatics up there, deal with fish scales. And so they would throw out these different terms to throw the people off. Those who know numismatics recognize those things and recognize when you're having serious meetings and you're really trying to fix or bring together people to fix things, you have to have a knowledge of what is real and what is fake. And I know it's uncomfortable a lot of times when you have to, make people that come together to your meetings erudite. But if they don't know these fundamental things, you're in trouble. We've been in trouble, conscious or non-conscious, because you can't deal with fiat and think it only is regulated to the coinage. It is not. The coinage is simply a weapon issue, a weaponized issue to support the fiat of governing de facto bodies using unlawful sovereign authority and seats of trust that don't belong to them. And this is again, where a lot of people keep looking for these people to recognize rights when their position is the absolute opposite. Just a reminder, you all.
There was I guess that's it. There was, let me go back here. There was a comment that I started, and I'm pretty sure a lot of folks know now, but what they say, there it is. Please let, where did I see it? Oh, okay. Please let, it's changing this subject, but please let everyone know that Brother Panic recently transitioned. If you didn't know,
Oh yes,
then that
yes, I'm aware.
And as a matter of fact, I would highly recommend. He has like a 3-part video out class.
Oh, I was looking at this. Gary Simmons says.
Let me finish this for a minute. Yeah. Lecture class called "Detailed Instructions on How to Die and Not Come Back Here." Look up under occult lectures and check that out. It's about 6 hours long. But when I tell you, if you can get past, because he does a lot of editorializing in there, but very, very extremely good material. I'm halfway through the 6 hours, almost 7 hours. But I would highly recommend that just as a, okay, so what do you think? Okay. This question right here. Can we sue our employers since we have never been paid in actual money?
This is where now what you can do, and now what we've been doing over the years, in harmony with your question, this is one of the reasons why over the years we have been sending those lawful notices to the IRS to get them off your back, to start right there, to bring you close to actual value, or for the purpose of actually protecting your right of owning your own labor. But knowing that the de facto operators are operating de facto, keep in mind that they're a criminal enterprise. Don't confuse their impositions with law, or that you are doing wrong. Now, what you can do, while you can lawfully sue them, lawfully, keep in mind, this is one of the reasons that they shut down consular court, because that's the proper venue. And so the Circle Church and Chancery owns the civil platforms of the human trafficking to disallow lawful regress. This is why every action or instrumentality they would present are all bills of attainder. See, so even when you're going looking for regress, they would interfere. This is, again, even back to some of the statements that was made a little earlier, why when people really understand what's going on, they would appreciate and totally support BRICS, because they're inadvertently, you understand, countering the enemy who has already defeated us. You get the point?
You're asking about your comments in the past not being able to find genuine. You've made comments in the past about not being able to find genuine gold and silver bullion, and how that corporations are passing off fake metals.
And this is going on too, because like, for instance, when they're trading internationally with the gold and silver bullion, that they're doing what you call drill tests. They'll drill test the bullion and put it in acids, etc., to see its quality. They've been having that problem too. This is another reason why a lot of the nations are not accepting the trade with the COMEX with the U.S. And also why China, the Mediterranean families, have been getting their gold from Qatar, and UAE, stuff like that, and from Saudi Arabia, etc., and from Sinda, that you call India, because the same problem exists, and we're still back to the Coinage Act and the regulations relative to it. And when you start looking at the modifications that they've been making, they slowly have been doing what? Robbing the people via the weights and measures. Then they went to the certificates. Then they removed the certificates and then went to the notes. And the people who don't understand that the note is a debt, they thought that the note was the dollar. Mm-hmm. None of it's a dollar. It's an oxymoron. But by this time, they know that the masses can't read. So when they look at the Federal Reserve note and it says dollar bill, except for a handful of people who can read, they don't know that's an oxymoron. They're actually opposites. So they're telling you the truth while lying to you. But they know they control the education system. And again, this is another reason why we're bringing this up, to do what? To remind ourselves to always be diligent and refine our thinking. Because all of us are on the path of doing what? Helping to correct this mess.
And I think that's a really, I think it's a really good segue for us. We have like 11 seconds, which we can take more time, of course, if we need it. But I would like to, you're talking a lot about meetings and coming together and folks not being productive or successful, but I wanted to remind everybody that we actually have an event that's coming up in 8 days from now. Yes. And we would love for sisters.
Yes.
For the sisters now, we need you to come out and let me see. Here we go. Right here. On Saturday, November 11th, those of you in and around or can get to Atlanta, East Point is actually, I guess like the suburbs of Atlanta, like next to Atlanta, in Atlanta kind of section, the Old College Park on Saturday, November 11th. The War of the Women Are Ready. I will be hosting along with our elder, Mama Callie Sitchin, and the 11th of November from 1 to 5. Now, Grand Sheik, we only have like about 30 tickets left. So I'm gonna just put it in the comments section. Put the post. We put the link in to get your ticket. I think there's about 30 tickets left for this event. I'll thank those of you who have gotten your tickets, and there will likely be no tickets at the door. So there's only 30 left.
And I think that's very important, Dr. G, that you're getting the sisters together, because keep in mind when you see the gender wars that they're instituting in these last few years and becoming more and more prominent, it's to create division so that we don't pay attention to what's really going on, to get us busy fighting each other. So keep that in mind. So it's important for the women to really get more focused, because a lot of women are distracted by the gender wars that are artificially introduced and think it's really us with ourselves in our communities when it's actually been introduced under the King Alfred.
Right. So we just want to make sure that you know about this event. Again, I just put the link in the comments that you can get your tickets, but there's only like 30 tickets left. So if you want to be there, you better get it tonight, because as soon as those 30 are gone, the link disappears. Even if you click on it, it's not going to work. But like I said, those of you who've gotten your tickets so far, I will be in Atlanta for that for about a week. Yeah, I'll be there from the 15th. I'm sorry, the 8th to the 15th. And would love to see you, sisters, and even some of you brothers. Maybe we'll get something else together, but that particular meeting is for the sisters. And we appreciate you. Grand Sheik will be back on the 3rd, on the 3rd Friday. There will not be an office hours with Dr. G this coming Tuesday, but may do some on what do you call it? On location recording while I'm in Atlanta for that week. So
that would be good.
Yes. So we hope that you sisters that have it in your heart to be there, can get your ticket. And thank you to the brother that did the cover up my book. He did donate for a ticket. So I will have a ticket for someone who can't afford a ticket. But can really come. So let me know. The link. Someone said, where's the link? Here's the link. Is it not showing up? I just put it up there again. That PayPal, that link will take you directly to it to be able to get your ticket. Like I said, we only have I counted, so it's like 30 left. 30. It's a small meeting, but there's only like 30 left. Okay. And shout out to Sister Tisha Caldwell. We love you, my sister. She gave us so much love last Friday, all the way from New Orleans.
Yep.
We thank you, sis. Thank you for you and your daughter and those, and even Sister Rebecca Kevin, all traveling all the way from Tennessee.
Yes.
With just her, So we appreciate you. We will not have a 4th Friday. What is it? The person in person live. We won't have one this month, and we won't have one in December. We may have one in January, and it is depending upon the weather, because we start to get into sometimes the crazy weather. The other thing we just want to have you do this is make sure you get ready and save this date, because
Yes.
we're looking for a larger venue, but the date's going to be the same, April 27th through 29th, 2024. So if you have to get a reservations or plane tickets or something, at least you know the dates are 27th through 29th in 2024, and we're calling it spring. Listen,
Yeah,
spring
and remind
spring.
them that the house
Look,
will be ready.
Spring into action conference.
Yes.
So we got to do something, y'all. So we
Remind them for
yeah.
a few.
And
that
then
the building will be
and
ready
yeah, for those of you who are part of our legacy group, we appreciate
ahead of
you.
time.
The house will be ready by then, but it's even though for that, it's first come first serve. So we want to make sure that you partake in that benefit of your support. We appreciate you. If you're not a member, legacy group member, hey, check out our website and sign up to be a legacy group member, and make a commitment. It helps us help you to do what we do here and some of the things we're trying to do going forward.
Help us.
Yeah. So we
Really?
appreciate you. So I think that it. Is that it? Is that
Yes.
Sheik?
Mhm.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. We going, and those of you sisters who are coming to Atlanta next week, I'll see you on the 11th, right? And that is, as Mama Callie said, that is Veterans Day, and we are all veterans of this war that we have been a part of for all of our lives.
All right.
So
Really.
all of us are veterans, and so it's our day. All
And we're
right.
just making some who didn't know they were veterans aware that they're veterans.
That's right. So
Mhm.
we are we're out of here. And I know you
Anyway, Islam, Assalamu alaikum,
Islam.
Shalom, Badi Makum, Bon Abort.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.